personally belong to a family who migrated as a refugee from Pakistani Punjab.
So the diaspora does not give funds alone, but it also provides ideas, skills, and knowledge for developmental activities.
The internal migrant labor force in Europe that actually facilitated an industrial revolution.
The Sri Lankan Tamil diaspora has an identity of being a Tamil and being a Sri Lankan.
The links between education and mobility in the context of a very strong culture of migration.
UAE is the largest destination of Indian diaspora, followed by the United States of America.
Gulf outside Kerala has created a Gulf within Kerala itself.
Work from home is not for the migrant workers. They have to go outside and they have to work.
My topic, which Professor Anthony have just mentioned, is on Manipur's diaspora in the US, mapping cultural and development ties with homeland. Manipur's American diaspora has never been studied from sociological perspective, and there is no scholarly work available about them. However, there are studies on Manipur's diaspora, especially from Myanmar, Tripura, and Assam since late 1990s and 2000 onwards. I try to focus on how Manipur's diaspora maintains their ethnic identity, traditional values and customs in their host country, and also raise question as to how, in what ways do they preserve their cultural ties with their homeland? What are their major challenges? Why are they giving back to the homeland when many of them are facing financial instability in their host country, especially after the economic recession in 2007 to 9 and the global financial crisis and the coronavirus recession in 2020. I also would like to mention that some of them are information technology, IT engineers, architects. Some of them are academics as professors, scientists, entrepreneurs, business administrators, nurses, doctors, and the like with H-1B visa. And also there are students with J-1 visa, their spouses with J-2 visa, and they retain their identity as Indians. But there are few who have become American citizens and have green card. So comparatively, Manipur's diaspora from Northeast India is much newer as compared to other diaspora. And they comprise the new diaspora. And majority of them are concentrated in New Jersey, Illinois, Texas, Philadelphia, North Carolina, Washington, DC, and California. The past 6 decades have witnessed the gradual magnitude of migration among the Manipur's American diaspora. The first wave of migration took place during the 1990s and 1970s, which comprises of a handful of students and skilled individuals. And some of the immigrants have returned to their homeland after completing their studies. During my interviews with the few selected respondents, especially during the lockdown, I'm told that in the late 50s, there was few people who came to US as theologian students, but left within a few years after completing their studies. So I did not include them in my work. One of the first migrants from Manipur was late Dr. Aryo A. Sishak, who belonged to a Tangkhul Naga tribe from Ukhrul district. And his family still lives. His children are now working, of course, And so during the first wave of migration in the 60s, there were just a dozen of them. And during the second wave of migration in the 80s and 90s, it is estimated that a few dozen migrated. Just like the new wave of mainstream Indian IT professionals who migrated to the US during the 1990s under temporary visa status, that is H-1B visa, due to the rapid growth of software industry, the engineers, architects, doctors, or any other professionals, they migrated to the US at the same time, just like the Indian H-1B visa holders. They happened to marry Americans, and therefore they were compelled to migrate to the US. And for example, I spoke to an 81-year-old classical Manipuri dancer and a teacher whose name is M. Nabagana Shyam Singha. And I quote, "I married an American dancer, Crystal Stevens, my disciple and dancer partner in 1982. And we migrated to the US in 1983 and had 2 children. And my children, my son and daughter, traveled to Manipur to get trained in Manipuri classical dance and Thangta. Thangta is a martial art of sword and the spear, which is performed in festivals," unquote. This Singha lives in Frederick in Maryland, and he continues to train dance and also give moral support to the new diaspora. Now, as a response to the gradual increase in population, a few people formed the ethnic and cultural organization known as North America Manipuri Association in 1991 in Brooklyn, New York, without any political ties or agenda. Usually this NAMA, North America Manipuri Association, celebrates its annual conventions on 4th July every year. That's the day of America's independence, to promote their cultural heritage, introduce new members, and also evolve new strategies. I am told that one of their founding members are Jupiter Yembem, who was killed in 9/11 terror attack at the World Trade Center in New York in 2011. His wife, Nancy Yembem, Drita Sinha, and also this 81-year-old dancer Singha, his wife, Crystal Stevens. They are the founders of this North America Manipuri Foundation. But I'm told that they have formed, after 5 years, another organization called North America Manipur Association, NAMA, and they replaced the term Manipuri with Manipur to be more inclusive, I guess. Now, in the early 1990s, these NAMA members used to communicate to each other through postal service, but they started to use technology gradually. One of my respondents called Lily Sharma from Texas said that the annual convention of NAMA is like a reunion of friends and relatives where they get to meet most of the diaspora from Manipur. So NAMA characterizes the concept of Little Manipur, just like Little India and Devon Street in Chicago, as most of them come together once a year. And it is also space for them to celebrate their culture, tradition, and identity. I also would like to emphasize that almost all the Meitei people in the US follow Hindu Vaishnavism, but some practice an indigenous and animistic religion known as Sanamahism or Sanamahi, where the followers worship their ancestors. And the Bishnupriya Meiteis from Bangladesh, Myanmar, Tripura, and Assam use the Bengali script and speak their own language, which is influenced by Meitei Lon, the Manipuri language. NAMA, as I mentioned, attempts to include the hill tribes of Manipur in all their events, like the Mizos, the Kukis, the Nagas, and the like, And this Hill tribes are mostly Christians, have their own organizations and Christian fellowships, and not actively involved in this North America Manipur Association, just like the Métis diaspora. Now, the third wave of migration took place from the early 2000s onward, when Manipuri population increased to more than 100 people. Interestingly, in 2016, they were around 300 people. But last year, when I conducted my field work, my respondents told me that their population have increased to around 1,000 people. The president of this NAMA, Raj Singham, who is an architect in Chicago, said 27 babies were born last year in the US. And he proudly said that these babies are the future generation of Manipur's American diaspora. Now, sociologically speaking, future generations are the social and cultural capital. And this diaspora attempt to trace their roots beside giving the younger generation an understanding of their homeland and upholding the traditional and cultural heritage through religious rituals, through songs and dance, food and the like. You know, they attempt to keep their heritage alive in their homeland by promoting an indigenous game called Kang, which is almost extinct today. So that, as Professor Paramjit Judge mentioned, how the diaspora funds their state, their community back in India, Manipuris also, just like the other Gujarati diaspora or the Punjabi diaspora or any other diaspora, they also, promote their own culture. They also provide fund to their homeland, which I will elaborate a little later. But interestingly, I found that this indigenous game called Kang, which is almost extinct, is now coming up again, reviving because of the funding from the diaspora. And not only that, the diaspora attempt to uplift the educational experiences of the students and skilled professionals, and they partner with a reputed organization. So in my observation, I found that this organization has people with good leadership skills and is open to ideas and new strategies of doing things, And due to an initiative at the Parvasi Bharatiya Divas in 2011, New Delhi, the Manipur state government invited the Manipur's American diaspora to put forth the knowledge initiative in their homeland. So accordingly, they placed an idea of knowledge exchange network where they propose to engage in the socio-economic development of Manipur. And they have been providing consultancy services and encouraging local entrepreneurs to start their business in Manipur. Now, I would like to demarcate the contours of the term Manipuri, Aka tribal, Aka Métis, and tribal identity. The term Manipuri is a contested terminology. In an interview when I conducted last year in April during the lockdown, a middle-aged couple from California alleged that they are not Manipuri, Aka Métis, but belongs to a tribe from Manipur. So their statement echoes the sentiment of other tribal individuals who are native of Manipur and attempt to specify and demarcate with certain meticulousness about the contour of the tribal versus the Manipuri Aka Métis. The politics and culture of difference and identity have been shaped in part by conflicts over the issue of ethnicity and the question of dominant caste versus subjugated tribes in Manipur. The ethnic groups were in turmoil, political turmoil, internal political turmoil in their homeland. And it is interesting that despite their political turmoil and ethnic differences, they often represented Manipur across space and time in certain annual events like India Day Parade in New York. Therefore, to clarify the confusion between the Métis and tribe, I use the term Manipur's American diaspora in my work to be inclusive of all the ethnic communities from Manipur. As we all know, Manipur is a multi-ethnic state and has been divided into two regions, the valley and the hills, and the caste and the tribal population, So ethnically, the caste and tribal population divided the state. The Meitei people constitute 53% of the total population in Manipur as per the census of 2011. And the Naga tribe constitute 24%. Zomi Kuki tribe comprises of 16%. Now, C. Wright Mills' sociological imagination of society is significant in my work, since my attempt is to understand how individuals from Manipur's ethnic groups manage to shift their perspective away from themselves and look at the issues more broadly surrounding them, bringing in context to individual accent change in the modern world. So C. Wright Mills believed in the power of the sociological imagination to connect personal dilemmas to public issues. Coming to my methodology, I use qualitative method via Zoom, email, video call, and personal observations from March to June 2020. I find that the snowball sampling was particularly useful in my work, as when one interview was finished, the researcher I requested that the respondent introduce me to her friends or his friends who would be interested in answering the same question. So in this process, the first respondent automatically introduced a bit of the topic to the second respondent and made it easier for me to interview the second respondent. It also helped to kind of establish a rapport with them. Most of my respondents reside in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Cincinnati, California, Texas, Boston, Burlington, Maryland, New Jersey, Washington, D.C., New York, Des Moines, Chicago, and Kansas City. And my work involves certain sociological aspects like what are the reflections of the selected respondents? Why did they migrate to the US? What are their occupation challenges, their vision and aspirations to develop their homeland? The generalization emerges out from responses. The generalization emerges out of the responses from the online fieldwork and personal observations. The respondent described the journey of migration and experiences of assimilation in the American society, including the techno-savvy ways of connecting to their families in their home. The unit of analysis in my study was 15 people, 11 women and 4 men only, and they represented the voices of their community in the US. So my work seeks to argue that the judicious responses can establish mapping the cultural and development ties with their homeland as they disclose the overall sentiments of their people. Now let me come to the American dream. US has welcomed immigrants with open arms earlier, although now there are restrictions to migrate after the COVID-19 pandemic, as we all know. The idea of America was associated with the metaphor of the melting pot, where all people who wanted to be part of the American dream realized their ambitions by working hard and prospering and assimilating into the American society by melting their identities and becoming American. Therefore, a uniform American identity emerged that was not inclusive. And then the melting pot model was replaced by the salad bowl model, where all ethnic groups and people of different orientations became American without losing their identities or melting, but became a part of the whole. So this concept suggests that the integration of different cultures combined like a salad, in contrast to the traditional notion of a cultural melting pot. The salad bowl model seems to be applicable in the context of various groups from Manipur. I interviewed Sungring Rangbung, who is an Anal tribe from Chandel district, Manipur. He worked in St. Luke's Hospital of Kansas City, and he came from a poor socio-economic background. Initially, he worked in the BPO call center in Bangalore, and he managed to gain experience and confidence there. Then he migrated to the US in 2007 after clearing TOEFL and GRE to do his master's degree majoring in Christian education. But he switched over to do his studies in nursing, and then he eventually got a job in the hospital to work in the emergency ward. And he told that he believed in hard work to become successful. Similarly, a Rongmai Naga lady called Ajailiu from Manipur, who came from a poor family, also, graduated from St. Agnes College in Mangalore, completed nursing degree from St. Martha's Nursing School in Bangalore. And she said that in mid-2000, the US was in short supply of healthcare workers and nurses. They were hiring nurses from all over the world and were given green card for those who came to work in the US. And she cleared English and CGFNS exam. And therefore, after that, she migrated to US in 2005. So she's a registered nurse in New York City, married to an American, and became an American citizen in 2011. So both these stories of Achun and Sungring reveal that America is a country of opportunity, where even people from poor economic background could excel and succeed through hard work. To reinforce their identity, culture, and tradition, some Manipur's American diaspora launch online live shows, podcasts, and YouTube channels, and conduct weekly or monthly shows in which they discuss cuisines, culture, literature, social concerns, current events of their homeland, and also global issues. For example, there's a lady called Kebola Wahengbam from Cincinnati, who started her YouTube channel on Manipuri traditional cuisine, cooking and gardening shows. Kebola is one of the first Manipuri women YouTuber, and she has thousands of followers. Sometimes she showcases her Manipuri traditional attires and she would dance, and then her husband, who is a professor, would sing Manipuri song. She said that she loved the people of Manipur, which she uses Kangleipak. Kangleipak is an alternate name of Manipur. And she wished everyone in Manipur to work hard and become successful. She also sent across a message from her YouTube channels that people of Manipur need to work, need to compete in this globalized world. That the contemporary youth should learn to eat healthy food, plant trees, and grow their own food. And she would often show how she plants, how she grow her food. So her husband will take a video of her planting and later on harvesting and then cooking and eating, on a dining table wearing a traditional Manipuri dress. Kebola does not only express her love for her people and homeland, but reflects fond memory and nostalgia of her childhood in her colony and desires to visit her homeland frequently. Robert King Merton, one of the noted American sociologists of the 1960s, argues that Americans were socialized into believing in the American dream, and that dream of success and material wealth is possible if they work, because the society was a meritocracy. Now, Kebola's expression affirms Robert King Merton's concept of the American dream to own a white picket fence house in Beverly Hills, expensive cars, comfortable lifestyle, and the like. I want to now focus on globalization, cultural ties, and identity. The migratory trend is intricately connected to the multifaceted process of globalization, which encompasses geographical, economic, political, technological, and cultural dimensions. We live in an extremely globalized world where the world is flatter than ever before, as pointed out by Thomas L. Friedman in his book, The World is Flat, in 2005. For Thomas Friedman, flattening is a product of the convergence of the personal computer with fiber optic cable, with the rise of workflow software. I'm not sure if globalization will continue to thrive like before, as the debate on globalization, which is a combination of globalization and globalization, is emerging at the forefront of academic discourse. Sociologist Roland Robertson in the Harvard Business Review coined the term globalization, and it refers to describe a product or service that is developed and distributed globally, but is also adjusted to accommodate the user and consumer in a global market. For example, McDonald's beef burger in the global market gives way to Mac Aloo Tikka vegetarian burger, or for non-vegetarians, we have the Maharaja chicken burger in India. Similarly, in the context of Northeasterners and other Asians, the fermented bamboo shoot called soibum in Manipuri and hawaizar or akuni in Nagamese dialect, or axiom of fermented soya bean, or fermented fish called ngari, or oksa akangba, smoked pork, and the like, in the various Asian stores across the US and online shops give way to satisfy the ethnic Manipur's American diaspora. The nurse from New York City, Atun Kamai, said, I am a good cook and often make authentic ethnic cuisines. I buy food items from Asian stores. Another software engineer from Illinois, Waribam Bhalendra, said, we call him Agu, short in his nickname. Agu said that, I quote, our traditional food habits are very much similar to South Asian countries like Korea, Thailand, China, and the like. We have varieties of Asian grocery stores available, since multicultural and multi-ethnic cuisines are available in various restaurants. We don't miss traditional cuisines, unquote. For the diaspora, food forms an indispensable part of mapping cultural ties with their homeland and asserts their cultural identity. A majority of women allege that cooking authentic dishes is an expression of nostalgia for their homeland and consider it a way of preserving their cultural identity. Shanti Thokchom voiced nostalgia of her indigenous food by saying that Manipur's cuisine are one of the healthiest in the world. And she says she cooked authentic dishes and often used the traditional spices, you know, like bamboo shoot, fermented fish, and fermented soya bean. Now, Dolly Kikon, anthropologist Dolly Kikon's work of this axion or fermented soya bean called akuni or hawaizar highlights the diversities of food, ways of cooking, and feasting among the Naga tribes, in which she argues that eating fermented food is an integral part of their culture and history. Dolly Kikon works as an assistant professor in Australia currently. She argued that the method of preparation, preservation, and taste of this hawaizar, akuni, or the fermented soya bean varies from culture to culture in Northeast India. If you look at the Khasis and the Garos in Meghalaya and the Mizos in Mizoram, then Nagas in Nagaland, and tribes in Manipur, or the Manipuris in Manipur. I mean, the methods of preparing is different from each of the states. The diaspora craving for ethnic food helped the Asian restaurants, entrepreneurs, and Asian grocery stores to garner the trust of the Indian diaspora people and strengthen their food business. In a nutshell, Globalization helps in connecting with the local Indian consumers on an emotional level and also leverage is global position. So culture helps them to have a sense of belonging, understand their identities, communities, and other people, which slowly develops from one's birth and is molded by norms, values, attitudes, and tradition of their homeland as well as the host country. Zygmunt Bauman argues that identity formation is never fixed, never final, veering between the pole of freedom and that of security. And it is an intervening of continuity and discontinuity that may now hold society together. Margaret Mead asserts that culture and identity are closely intertwined since the former defines a person's identity. So the cultural identity helps this Manipur's diaspora in making decisions and uphold certain behaviors. One of my respondents, Lili Sharma from Texas, said that even though she spent less time in Manipur during her childhood, her memories, taste of food, and emotional attachment is all tied to Manipur. And she also said that she always tried to remind her children and second generation diaspora who are not born in Manipur about her ties with homeland by sharing her childhood stories, how she grew up in Manipur and how she spent her time. And she says she felt sad that these children, will never feel so attached to Manipur like she does. Now, it is significant for the diaspora to have a strong sense of identity, although they may have dual identities and cultures such as the Manipuri diaspora, Naga diaspora, Kuki diaspora, or Indian diaspora, Telugu diaspora, a combination of more than two identities. They have a sense of national identity that belongs to India as well as the US. Last year, during the month of July, 4th July, the North America Manipur Association, NAMA, had an annual webinar convention where I also participated, and I found this young girl, teenage girl, who played flute at the beginning of the webinar convention, which was followed, and she played flute of an Indian national anthem first, followed by an American national anthem, which was followed by songs and other performances by artists from homeland as well as the diaspora. Now this reveals their sense of patriotism and loyalty to both the homeland and the host country. Another factor that I want to mention is language. Language reinforces the cultural identity of the diaspora in a new territory. If language is lost, the culture will also disappear in due course of time. And sometimes they are compelled to learn a new language in their host country. Achun Kamai, who's a nurse in New York, said that initially it took a few months for her to learn American English language and the accent, American accent, since she came from a small village in Manipur. See, Americans speak fast with deep accent. And she lived with a mixed racial community where there are people from Mexico, Jamaica, Philippines, Russia, India, and Africa. And, she said that she speaks dialect with her Rongmai dialect with her family through WhatsApp video call, FaceTime, and Zoom. And she also speaks Manipuri with her fellow Manipur diaspora in the US. And similarly, another lady, Kumari Daimai Bhiller, who belonged to a Liangmai Naga tribe from Dothan, Alabama, said that she teaches the Liangmai Naga dialect to her son and daughter, although they don't speak at home. And she used to dress her kids up in her traditional Liangmai Naga attire for special occasions and tell them about her childhood, family, kinship, and the like, so that the children would know their mother's roots and culture. Professor K.L. Sharma and Professor T.K. Oman examined the cultural assimilation of language in a new land, where they said there is a close association between language and territory. When groups migrate and settle in new linguistic region, they may have to learn the language of the new habitat, whereas they need not change their religion, and of course, they cannot change their race. So these two ladies, Kumari Daimai Miller and Achun Kamai's statement, affirm this assertion which Professor K.L. Sharma and T.K. Uman have written in their book. Manipur's American diaspora attempts to preserve their cultural identities of their homeland. A software engineer from Burlington, who's a Manipuri, said that they celebrate festivals to maintain and retain their cultural identity and roots, and also speak their Manipuri language. You know, as I mentioned, they come together for traditional events, festivals, marriage ceremonies, or religious rituals like Swasti Puja, or just get together for any purpose where they will cook their own traditional dishes and feast together. One of the IT professional from Baltimore, Maryland, her name is Sonia. She said that there are around 12 Manipuri families in Washington, DC area. And so they come together to celebrate Ningol Sakauba, Yausang. Yausang is a holy festival, Kang, which is an extinct indigenous game. Christmas, Chairoba. Chairoba is a Manipuri New Year's Day, and many other festivals. And they even started Marup. Marup is like self-help group, you know, a very popular traditional method of taking money on rotation basis among the women from Manipur. And they also have potluck regularly in Baltimore. Even women respondents from Texas said that they do the same. And there is a Mar tribal lady called Ruati Bongpoi. Ruati from Manipur said that every day she preferred to eat rice and Mar tribal cuisine. She grows vegetables like bitter leaves, chilies, and the like in her pots in her garden. And in Houston, they have few families from Manipur, and they always come together in a friend's house. And she said for Christmas, Ruati said that Christmas dinner is always hosted in her house. And they also wear traditional attires and, try to eat their cuisines on such occasions. So the above narratives reveal that they can preserve the cultural heritage of their homeland completely in their host country. Now, giving back to homeland, which Professor Judge have also talked about in brief, the bond between the diaspora and the homeland depends not only on the government policies, but on the cultural and development ties. The question arises whether the diaspora and the people of their homeland belong to each other, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 has brought the studies of migration, diaspora, and giving back to center stage. The purpose of giving back is much closer to the heart of the new, successful, and knowledge diaspora. They desire to uplift their people in their homeland during crisis, and they would like to see some visible change happen similar to what they observe in their host country. The French sociologist Marcel Mauss, in his work The Gift, published in 2020, argued that the theory of the gift is a theory of human solidarity. He did his ethnographic fieldwork among the various tribes in Polynesia and the Pacific Ocean. For Marcel Mauss, the gift that does nothing to enhance solidarity is a contradiction. Each gift is a part of the system of reciprocity in which the giver, the honor and prestige of the giver and the recipient are engaged. The cycling gift system is the society. So Marcel Mauss argues that in the things exchanged during the potluck, a power is present that forces gifts to be passed around, to be given and returned. Now, all these things are always spiritual in origin and of a spiritual nature. Potlatch is a ceremonial feast where people display their property and wealth and gifts to affirm and reaffirm their status and prestige. It is the fact that the identity of a giver is invariably bound with the object given that causes the gift to have a power which compels the recipient to reciprocate. So Marshall Moore's theory points out that gifts are inalienable and they must be returned. The act of giving creates a gift debt that has to be repaid. So for Marshall Moore, the free gift that is not returned is a contradiction because it cannot create social ties. He believed that gifts are never truly free. Rather, human history is full of examples of gifts bringing about reciprocal exchange. A gift economy or gift culture is a mode of exchange where valuables are not traded or sold, but rather given without an explicit agreement for immediate or future rewards. So this contrasts with the barter economy or a market economy where goods and services are primarily explicitly exchanged for valued receipt. The critics of Marshall Moore argue that his theory of gift does not apply between the beggar and the passerby giver or donor and receiver, the diaspora and their homeland people, since it is a free gift without knowing each other or without any expectation in return. The receivers do not have any obligation to return the gift. Majority of givers may not have any expectations in return, but they have a sense of satisfaction in sharing their wealth. And some of them accomplish their spiritual journey through giving. And a few others give because giving is vogue, fashionable nowadays, and associated with prestige and status. Marshall Salins, in 1972, in his work, observed that culture is the driving force behind human behavior and development. And for Marshall Salins, generalized reciprocity is gift giving without the expectation of an immediate return. So giving is not necessarily about cash, but the sharing of skills, knowledge, and time. To Americans, time is money. When I did my field work in 2013 and 14 in the University of Iowa for my postdoctoral research on Indian diaspora and philanthropy, I found that it's not only cash, but time, knowledge, and skills that matters to the diaspora. Because more than anybody else for Americans, time is money. I found that the purpose of giving back to their homeland, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic, is that they desire to uplift their people, and they would like to lower debt rates due to COVID-19. Their intervention to send financial aid through online transactions to their respective village, town, city, state reveals a sense of responsibility to help, and also the genuine intention to protect the people from COVID-19 pandemic. Secondly, it reveals their basic moral and emotional ties with their homeland. Their aspirations, their inspirations to give back are a combination of traditional concerns of family, kinship, caste, and spiritual sentiments, and the idea of doing something good for their family members, the poor and the needy. The amount of donation may be small or even huge, but giving is a reflection of the desire to intervene in terms of crises like COVID-19. A few individuals raise funds through their skills like paintings. During my interview last year, they do painting, tailoring, made videos to spread awareness about COVID-19 in their own ethnic dialects and launch it online to connect with their homeland and their people. Some of them give back, for example, even to their host country, not only to their homeland. For example, there's a lady called Venus Senzam. She used her skill of stitching, tailoring, and made hundreds of face masks at her residence and donated it to healthcare in community centers like Shatak Hospital, Ballerica Food Care, Franklin Senior Center, Beth Israel Hospital, Hockomock Area YMCA, Franklin, New Jersey State, Adult Care Center, New York State, Friends, Family, and other communities. Now let me talk about a few case studies. Roti Bongpui from Texas said, and I quote, "I'm making face masks at home since there is a great need for personal protective equipment like face masks due to COVID-19 pandemic. My first priority is to help medical personnel, but when I have capacity, I make for others as well. The nurses then distribute the mask to other team members as needed. All the face masks have gone to US hospitals and Indian immigrants living in US. Since many of my friends are from Manipur originally, a large portion of masks and surgical heads went to Manipur's diaspora living in the US. I'm concerned about, but more concerned about US because US has 1/3 of worldwide COVID-19 cases, which makes US the most affected country." Now, this lady, Roti Bongpui, was featured by the Indian Embassy in Washington, D.C. for her contribution during the COVID-19 pandemic. Another lady, Lily Sharma from Texas said, "I am more concerned about COVID-19 pandemic back home in Manipur. I feel deeply concerned about my aged parents, siblings, and friends who live there. Also, that is the place I have grown up. However, I give funds to Homeland through NAMA. I'm the treasurer of NAMA, and in mid-June 2020, NAMA donated rupees 1,87,150 to the Chief Minister's COVID-19 Relief Fund in Manipur, and also to 2 orphan children's home in Manipur," unquote. Another case study, Shanti Thokchom, a nurse from Tulsa, Oklahoma, said, "I made some amateur short video clips in order to spread awareness about COVID in Kuki dialect and share it in Facebook. I always encourage the young people to work hard and look forward to a better life and a great future, but that needs hard work," unquote. My last case study is a software engineer from Washington, D.C., Monica Ingudam, who also is a founder of findingmyvoices.com, a podcast talk show anchor. She said, "I give back to Homeland by organizing personality development workshop and sessions, a platform to think differently, offering different perspective through my talk show, findingthevoices.com, carrying out fundraisers by using my art, oil painting for palliative care, and education of Kangui Hope Children's Home of Kangpopi in Manipur, and other projects like Gratitude Project of Manipur and Book Club in times of COVID-19 pandemic. I also give back to the US through my skills in innovating in the healthcare industry with emerging products, and by being a speaker to motivate through sharing about my career and experiences," unquote. So the above case studies that I just narrated reveal that the amount of donation may be small or huge, but giving is a reflection of their desire to intervene in times of crisis and for the betterment of the people. Many of them give through NAMA, but a few individuals raise funds through painting and other innovative strategies and give back for a cause in their homeland. So the diaspora does not give funds alone, but it also provides ideas, skills, and knowledge for developmental activities. As I mentioned, few of them launch online YouTube channels and websites to connect with not only the other diaspora from Manipur, but to facilitate youth from the state of Manipur to come to North America for studies and to work. And whenever they visit Manipur, which is once a year or once in 2 years or 3 years, Some of them tend to visit their alma mater, NGOs whom they connected to, and individuals whom they have supported financially and share skills. Now let me come to the second last section of my talk, that is the challenges. There are numerous challenges as immigrants that they encounter in their everyday life. One of the software engineer, my respondent shared his challenge and struggles as an immigrant. He said, sending my 1-year-old baby to daycare was a bit of a challenge, and leaving my kid to someone unknown for an entire day was a big decision. I took some time to adjust it. Driving a car on the right side in the US was challenging initially, so does following traffic rules and learning new traffic signs. This was never the case in India. In India, the only signal respected is red light, and this also only in the metropolitan cities. Unlike India, workplace is different. Everyone comes on time and leaves on time. There is no hierarchy, and all responsibilities are discussed openly and transparently, unquote. Another respondent called Perilee Sem Mayer, who is a nurse married to an American at Medical City, Denton in Texas, echoes, and I quote, "When I first moved to Dallas, Texas, I hardly know how to drive a car, and there was no public transportation. I was compelled to learn the art of driving from my late American husband," unquote. In a similar way, Sonia from Washington, D.C. area said, "We are in a state of raising our children in the host country. We don't know what is stored in our future here, but we definitely want our children to have a good future. I do miss my homeland, but sometimes when I went home for vacation, it feels like Manipur has progressed so much. It is not the old Manipur we knew. With the internet, everything is global. I saw several children speak English like an American due to the availability of YouTube channels," unquote. Another lady called Monica Ingudam said, and I quote, "I knew driving prior to my arrival in US in 2004, but adapting to driving here with the right-hand driving, changing lanes while driving at a fast speed was an experience. Besides, a volatile job market led me to being let off twice, and career choice of taking breaks in between to balance family life when my kids were born, and the struggle of jumping multiple hoops, compromising on roles and salary to get back in the career track to the role I want was a challenge. The other challenge includes not having close family support, especially during the early years of my children, and the long distance relationship and connection with my family, where I couldn't truly be open on what I was going through, as I didn't want to bother them with my struggles. Missing my father's funeral was very difficult for me," unquote. The last case study, Santi Thokchon from Tulsa, Oklahoma, narrated her story of migration, tussle, and the process of cultural assimilation. She said, and I quote, "I migrated to the US in April 1999. I'm a trained nurse from Jorhat Christian Medical Center, Assam. Prior to my arrival in the US, I used to take care of the babies of some of the ultra-rich business families in Mumbai, and I loved my job. One particular family was looking for a trustworthy person to take of their baby girl, Janvi Arora, as both parents were doctors in New York doing their internship. And this is my story of travel to US. The doctor couple were nice and thoughtful and allowed me to attend church, which I was missing very much, and have some time for myself. I met my American husband in the church. I never thought I would ever get married, but we got married in 2000 by a justice piece of leak, as I had no family in the US. We made a huge cultural adjustment, especially food habits. I liked rice, whereas he likes potatoes and meat. I had a tough time adjusting in my husband's neighborhood, since majority of the people were Hispanic, and I could not speak Spanish. I miss home so much during those days. After a few months, I got permission to work and I started working at a daycare. And my son Raj was born in 2001, but I became lonely and depressed. However, I could overcome it slowly as motherhood kept me busy. We moved to Oklahoma in 2003 as some Kuki tribal families in Tulsa suggested us, and I also wish to be closer to my community folks and for lower cost of living. Unfortunately, my husband died in an accident in 2008. Today, I live with my son Raj and work among the high-risk elderly people during this COVID-19 pandemic without sufficient masks and gloves. Life is also a challenge, unquote. So the immigrant nurses earn much less than the doctors, though they are in high demand in the US, especially during this time of the pandemic. When they are paid less, they have to work in 2 or 3 places, as Professor Paramjit Judge has pointed out in the previous one of the seminars. And if they work among the elderly people who have low immunity, the nurses are at high risk of being affected by COVID-19. Now, thankfully, there is COVID vaccine, which most of these diaspora nurses claim that they have taken the vaccine. The question is how many of the diaspora could afford to sustain themselves and their families during this COVID-19 pandemic, since many people are suffering from salary cuts and some have lost their jobs. A major problem is the challenge of monitoring funds by the diaspora during this current pandemic, since Manipuris cannot travel and meet personally with those whom they support. And almost every women giver is keen to make sure that their money goes to the beneficiary directly in India. Women tend to give in smaller amounts regularly, whereas men give more but prefer to make a single payment. My conclusion: Manipur's American diaspora is almost like the old Indian diaspora, since many of them are settling down, purchasing houses and cars, concentrating on their children's education, adjusting to life without an extended family member support, assimilating with the new culture of their host country and the like. You know, they attempt to give world-class opportunities such as education, sports, music, and the like, which they never had in their homeland to their children, the younger generations. The increasing number of migration and challenges faced by Manipur's American diaspora need to be addressed constructively to bring about an inclusive society and a model sub-minority ethnic community in the US. We may lay the groundwork for the next generation of inclusive society by respecting and supporting each ethnic group, expanding economic opportunity, and promoting entrepreneurship to strive in the years to come. But the Meitei, Manipuris, and the tribal groups need to accept each other and celebrate their differences, by upholding the spirit of unity and diversity. The false ideas of pollution and purity and essentialism create stereotypes that need to be abolished with enabling ideas of ethnicity. For example, an example would be a group of Kukis speaking Thadao dialect and Meiteilon show diverse identities, and all these identities are co-created and contextual and not foisted from above. Thank you so much for your patient listening.